Welcome to episode number 298 of Destination Linux. Destination Linux is a video podcast show from the TuxDigital Network. If you're new to the show, this is a discussion podcast perfect for all experience levels. Whether you're brand new to open source or a guru of Sudo, this is the podcast for you. My name is Ryan.
I'm Jill.
And I'm Michael.
On this week's episode of Destination Linux, we have an exclusive interview with Lukasz from Pine64 about a brand new board that they're releasing. You don't want to miss this discussion, especially if you're in that camp where the Raspberry Pi has been elusive for you because it's all out of stock. We got some really cool things from Pine64 that'll make that go away. Then we'll be discussing the drama of Fedora codecs, plus we have our tips, tricks, and software picks. All of this coming up right now on Destination Linux. So this week's feedback comes from Reddit, but if you want to send in your own feedback, go to tuxdigital.com/contact to get in touch, or join the TuxDigital community forum by going to tuxdigital.com and clicking on the forum link at the top of the page. This post caught my attention on Reddit because it's one of those things I believe at some point in all of our episodes we may have talked about briefly, but I wanted to bring it back up because it's been many, many years and I was on the fence about this one, so I wanted to get Michael and Jill's opinion on this. The person wrote, "It's 2022. Why don't GUI file managers have the ability to prompt for a password when a user attempts to perform a file operation that requires root, rather than just saying, laugh out loud, nope?" I don't know any file manager that actually says laugh out loud, nope, but I think I want to put that feature request in.
I want that to be there now.
Yes, that would be really funny. Now, I know there are plugins for Nautilus and other file managers have like open as root options, but it's a mixed bag, right? Some have this feature, some have a portion of the feature, some don't have it at all. However, it's not consistent, which is something I think we need to talk about. And two, why not give this ability for people to do this? Why are we locking it down? You can do it in Windows, you can do it in Mac OS. Why not in Linux consistently in the file manager? Thoughts?
I really think it's more security reasons. Although, there should sometimes be a prompt there saying to either let you know to log in with super user privileges or just a prompt to put your password in. I think that is actually a good idea. And honestly, I was just thinking it was because of the lineage of Linux. Back in the day, we used to have a separate root and a separate user install, like under Debian, and back in the day. So you would just take care of that then.
Back then there was a thing, but in between from now and 15 years ago, there was a period where there were options to do these kinds of things, where it would just activate and ask you to do this stuff. And then some file managers decided to remove these features. And it is understandably annoying, but a lot of the times when I've talked to a couple of the developers, they do say that security is the basis for changing that. And I do think that that is a reasonable basis for such a decision, but it has been a long time since those things have changed. And it kind of makes me wonder, is there no possible way that this could be created in some way to be safer for people who are not familiar with what this is doing versus people who actually want to do it? Like, why does it stop people who are experienced like us who want to make these changes? And I think that that is a totally reasonable question to ask, going forward, because in my opinion, the way that Windows does it with the click OK and move on, it's a very simple question whether to do it or not. And there is really no clear way to warn people not to do it because people just ignore those kinds of questions and you just skip it. It's like how people are ignoring the ramifications of what those pop-up messages are even saying. Right. And they will accidentally do something they shouldn't have done. But I think that the password is a good process to say, this is significant enough that you will have to put your password in. And that should be good enough warning, in my opinion. Because once that is asking you a password, it should tell you that this is a security-related feature. So if you don't know what this is going to do, don't do it. So I think that it's overly cautious at this point.
Yeah, I think if they had an option, maybe for standard users, we've seen on Linus Tech Tips video when he was playing with Pop! OS and it gave a big warning not to do something and they did it anyways and it broke the system. I can see how people are used to ignoring these type of things and giving people root access by default to some of these things would be a really bad idea. But there are a lot of people who do have the experience to be messing with this. It is a little archaic at times to try to navigate in other ways through the terminal and stuff. So why not have an option, a setting that enables this that's off by default that people could enable and then do the password thing like you're talking about, Michael, would be a good option. But I think it definitely needs to be something consistent. I'm looking at the live chat right now. Some people are saying it's security. Some people are mentioning that Windows doesn't always allow you to do certain things with just the OK button. Sometimes you have to right click on the program and tell it that you want to run as administrator or those type of things. So they obviously have the same issues where they're trying to figure out that balance of, hey, you're about to enter something where you could really break something, but doing it in such a way that it doesn't make it that so difficult to go and make the change, especially for something that's maybe simple.
Right. Yeah. And, like the Synaptic Package Manager does prompt you, if you run it not as root, it says you need to be in root to install applications. That's nice that it's been doing that for years.
Some applications do it in general. And also, for example, Kate, the text editor from KDE, is another example because when you save a file for a place that you don't have permissions as your regular user, it will ask you to put in your password to get permission, and then it will save the file. So you can do it inside of Kate, and you can open files with Kate for the same kind of purpose of editing directly. So there are applications that can do it, and also some file managers can do certain levels of it. Like Dolphin has the ability to some degree do this, such as asking for permissions when you're trying to run an executable, but not always like drag and drop. So if you want to move files from one folder to another and then the target folder doesn't have permissions, it will just give you like a pop-up that says you don't have access, and then that's all your options. It's either OK or cancel, which both effectively do the same thing. So like in those situations, I understand how that can be frustrating because the dialog pop-up just gives you no option whatsoever. Personally, when I want to move something, I just use the terminal. And I don't think that's the best option in general because I'm doing that as a compensation workaround, and it's not my first choice. I did first try to do it with Dolphin until I realized I couldn't do it, and so I did a workaround with a terminal. And there are workarounds for these file managers to install like plugins or modifications of some kind of module that gives you the option to do open as root or move in those kinds of ways, but it's not exactly recommended by the developers who make the file managers because they're third party and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. It's something I think should be looked at by the developers who make the file manager, and hopefully, they come up with a system that isn't so, like I said, overly cautious.
There you go.
Yeah.
This episode of Destination Linux is brought to you by DigitalOcean. Get started by going to do.co/tux2022. DigitalOcean is an awesome service. You don't have to worry about being overly cautious there because you can throw up as many droplets as you want and mess around, and if something goes bad, no big deal. You just make a new droplet, or you can create a snapshot to easily go back and forth. You never have to worry about, oh, I did it wrong. You can get back within like 10 to 15 seconds. Just fantastic. Plus, cloud computing can be, let's say, complex, but standing up reliable, affordable cloud infrastructure doesn't have to be, because DigitalOcean can get you set up and running on their awesome cloud platform quickly and easily. And at DigitalOcean, you can enjoy a comprehensive portfolio of compute, storage, database, and networking products that put your cloud infrastructure in capable hands so you and your teams can get back to doing what matters most, building world-changing apps that grow your business. And DigitalOcean also offers predictable pricing, robust product documentation, and services that developers love. Like I mentioned, you can easily, quickly set up snapshots to be able to revert anything you do on your droplet. Such a great feature, as well as the one-click droplets that you can do in the DigitalOcean marketplace. Plus, at DigitalOcean, you can get support at every stage of growth, whether you have a team of one person or a team of 1,000 people. With DigitalOcean, you can get growing with their simple, powerful cloud computing services. And as a listener of the Destination Linux podcast and a member of the TuxDigital community, you can get started for free. In fact, it's even better than free because DigitalOcean is giving you a $100 60-day free credit when you sign up at do.co/tux2022. That's do.co/tux2022. So again, go get started with that awesome free credit you can get for $100 for 60 days on DigitalOcean's fantastic cloud platform by going to do.co/tux2022.
we would like to welcome back to the show Lukasz from Pine64 to discuss some very exciting things that they have in the works for us. Lukasz, welcome back to Destination Linux.
Thank you for having me again. It has been a year and a bit since we last seen each other. It's too long.
Way too long.
Too long, well, I guess.
We're always excited when there's a new product coming from Pine64, and there's been one that's kind of hit the media. There were leaks, like the big, Apple and everybody has these secret inside leaks. Pine64 had a leak. We kind of reached out to you and we're like, hey, we want you to come on the show and tell us about this leak that's happened, this important thing. Of course, it's not a leak anymore. The official blog post came out yesterday on it, but Aux64 with RISC-V. Tell us about this new device.
Yeah, so the Aux64 is both a microcontroller as well as a Linux-capable single-board computer. So it's able to run both bare metal RTOS system as well as full-blown Linux. It has 3 cores, and we're gonna have 2 different SKUs available to play with, depending on what they're more interested in, whether they're more interested in the Linux side of things or in the bare metal stuff. So the Linux comes with, or the Linux SKU comes with both 128 megabytes of onboard flash as well as a SD card for expansion, whatever you may need that for, and comes in at $8 US. So
wait, was that 80? $8? $8. Just $8
US.
Wow.
Amazing.
Correct. Yeah.
Incredible.
So I suppose the idea is that, it can serve multiple purposes to many different people, and kind of service a lot of different fields within the community and the industry. I think it's very interesting because you never know what's going to blow up and, what's going to be picked up by the media. And there's certainly a need for this sort of device. And my guess is that the selling factor here is that if you are interested in RISC-V and just want to get hands-on and try development and see how the architecture is, this is like a very low entry point where you can just pick one up and have fun with it, even if you don't intend it for any particular project.
At $8 for a RISC-V, it's a very low entry point, and it gets a lot of people the ability financially to be able to start exploring in RISC-V more, which is very exciting to me. I love it.
Yeah, and you guys are no stranger to RISC-V, having a chip in the PineSol, for instance. That was a good place to start. Really was.
It was, yeah. Although that was strictly a microcontroller. So we were looking like at the end of last year, beginning of this year, I've communicated to people that we will be exploring RISC-V this year and for years to come, for that matter. And we knew that we want to have a full-blown RISC-V single board computer, something to be on par with Core64, which is our current ARM-based single board computer. And 2 months ago, we announced that we're doing the Star64, which is a very close proxy to the Core64, but running RISC-V. But there's RISC-V or Linux and on RISC-V has still a long way to go. And lowering the entry point is also something we wanted to do. I mean, some people pick up single board computers to do all sorts of hobby-based stuff on them, but there's also the whole industry around these things. And they want a really sort of mature operating system that is kind of fleshed out, and RISC-V has a way to go in this respect. So, we knew that we also want to make an entry point device for people just to get hold on RISC-V and start playing with it.
Love it.
Nice. So, Lukasz, you touched on this a little bit already. So, what are the primary use cases you foresee this board being used for?
Yeah, I think that, again, because it can do both the bare metal stuff and Linux, I think that the kind of the spectrum of possibilities is quite wide. I should also mention that the board has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, as well as you could break out the CSI interface, so that's for cameras. So I have my best friends, they have a vineyard and a winery, and they've been looking for a cheap system to monitor particular what are they called, vines, or throughout their fields. And the idea of having multiple H264s with a camera attachment, and if the camera attachment is say $5, then you have something that is capable of taking a picture every say hour or 2 hours, or even once a day, right, and sending it back via Wi-Fi to a server. This is a fantastic application. But I mean, sky's the limit. I suppose that a lot of people would want to use it for robotics, for
that's what I was thinking.
Sensors, all sorts of things of that nature. But again, I think that the initial wave of people who will be picking one up just to check out the RISC-V architecture on the cheap.
Obviously. And I wanted to mention, I understand now the why you have the motion JPEG encoder in there now, because that's really good for cameras, embedded video capture systems, use motion JPEG, and even our webcams and cameras. So that was a really good decision to put that in coding.
Yeah, we've talked with Buffalo, which are the people behind the BL808 SoC, quite a bit about what they're quite forthcoming and easy to work with. So we've had a very good relationship with them due to the Pine64, which you mentioned, Joe, right? Which obviously the Pine64 has become a quite a significant product for Pine64. It's officially listed as Amazon's choice for soldering.
Nice.
Yay!
I love hearing that.
In United States. So, that says a thing or two about how popular the device has become, which also opened up the path to work with Buffalo and kind of find some sort of ideas which we could ping pong back and forth and figure out, if they would be willing to incorporate some of the things we would like to see in an SoC.
What percentage do you think that the Pine still has that is attracting users and customers for getting the Amazon choice? What percentage do you think is the attraction from the quality of the device and the name PineSill?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think so. We've recently released I don't want to call it a new PineSill. I want to say a revised version of the original. I think when the original came out, what it did was that it offered more features for half the price of what was available at the time on the market. If anything, I would imagine that initially what the PineSill did was it introduced people to other devices that we make, because there's obviously a lot of people who do not necessarily care about open source or whatever. They're just they do soldering for whatever, for jobs or
for fun,
electricians, what have you. Yeah, for fun. And there's definitely a group of people who came in, I could see because I monitored the chats now and then. And there's definitely a group of people who came in and they said, oh, so you also make, single board computers and smartphones and what have you. So initially, definitely it was a question of price to performance. Now, I don't know if the branding carries some weight. Possibly.
Well, I like to pretend that it does, even if it's not true.
I'd like to think.
In a world where we're seeing a lot of drama occurring between hardware manufacturers and open source projects and things, Pine64 has been capable of remaining out of that drama and just building really good partnerships. And one of the things I want to highlight with that is you mentioned the boards are already shipped to Linux developers out there ahead of time, and doing things like that to me is one of the reasons why we love Pine64 so
Absolutely.
much. Like that to me just shows, a lot of Pine64's philosophy, tell me if I get it wrong, but is more of, hey, we get this hardware for you. We get it out there. You all build the software. The community builds the software around it and does whatever they want, whether it's creating, like with this new board, lights, sensors, robotics, operating systems they put on it. We're giving you the platform, go play with it. But you're also making sure that you're giving the developers chance to actually start integrating some of these pieces so people have a starting point. And that, to me, is just one of the amazing things about Pine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our philosophy has been now for quite some time that we start by creating a test run of single board computers. Usually it starts with single board computers, and then we offer them to developers who we have an established relationship with, and they get to offer feedback to us on the device and tell us, if they think that there should be any improvements to it, if they'd like to see anything changed, or if they don't like it at all, for that matter. Right? We've had a few of these things happen as well throughout the years. At which point we sometimes scrap the project. So once we get the feedback, the single board computer comes out, and once at least rudimentary support for it is in place, people can just pick it up. We usually also make sure to notify prospectus buyers about the status of a device. So some of our devices which had a little bit more time, the ROC Pro 64 and A64 and so forth and so on, they're really, really well supported at this point. But some of the newer devices, they still have some way to go, and we usually make sure to communicate clearly to customers that if you're picking this up, it's mostly for development, right? So, and for sure, we'll be doing the same thing with the Aux64, right? If you're picking one up, you have to. It won't be plug and play initially for the first couple of months, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think it's great that you're upfront about that. And that's one of the things that I was a big fan of Pine64 in the beginning when you announced many different products. And there's a lot of cool stuff that's, in the store for Pine64. But one of the products that we're really looking forward to is the Pine Note. Are there any updates you can give us on this exciting product? Yeah,
so there are a few. So the big challenge with the Pine Note isn't really the SoC. The SoC has done really well in the past year, which is probably about the time we last spoke about this, and the Pine Note in particular. And the SoC is now, I want to say, fully mainlined. The big problem with the Pine Note is getting the e-paper display to function perfectly with open drivers and all that, obviously, that being one of the criteria. So I don't know if I have mine here on hand, but I run Arch on mine, and I use it as a PDF reader. And 2 or 3 months ago, a group of developers managed to get the pen input working without a significant lag, which is really important and something which is quite difficult. Obviously, this requires backwards engineering a lot of the waveform code and figuring out how to make it all work.
Yeah.
The reason why Pine Note isn't broadly available to everyone is not because of the SoC and not because there's any major outstanding functionality. It's just that the core experience with the e-paper isn't particularly good, and it will take time for the e-paper to get for the driver for the e-paper to get properly implemented.
Let me add another reason I love Pine64: the honesty that you guys have with things like this, and not selling something out there that, even though your philosophy is, hey, we'll put it out in their community, you guys build something, but obviously you want it to be at a certain standard. And just the honesty that you guys always demonstrate with this stuff is just something I want to applaud, because you don't see it very often. Obviously, it's very expensive for you all to have this stock on hand and not be shipping it and making any money off of it. But I think you're doing the right thing, holding it back until it's got, at least the foundation ready to go for people to start playing and hacking around with. This is one that I particularly, as you remember when we had you on for the big reveal, like, I want one of these so bad. You have no idea how annoying it is to constantly be keeping up with notebooks or what other 50 other things I decide might be a good way to organize my notes that I never keep up with. And so there's 50 of them. So I think this will be the answer that I need. And so I'm excited for this to come as soon as possible. But I keep checking back and seeing the out of stock thing and now we know why.
So let me just say that the progress has been really, really quite fast in the past 6 months. So, there is a good chance that granted we find the right partner for the operating system and somebody who would be able to put together or at least theme their distribution, the user interface, in a way which would be suitable for a grayscale device. Then, starting early next year, you could be looking at some announcements in this area.
Nice. I'm excited about that. So I want to talk about something that we've had on our Hardware Addict show that's impacted Wendy directly as she's trying to do robotics, and it's impacted people across the industry. My patrons, people listen to this show talk about this. The Raspberry Pi has been out of stock for a long time, and those that do exist are being scalped and the prices are through the roof. It's upsetting educational institutions. It's upsetting science institutions, businesses trying to use this. What is the best alternative? Raspberry Pi is not the only device out there, obviously, that can do these type of things. What's the best alternative that Pine has for the Raspberry Pi 4?
Since the Raspberry Pi shortages kind of started, we've seen a significant uptake of wide variety of our boards and compute modules, especially for industry partners, which is quite interesting. We're seeing a lot of people going back to the quite old but really well supported RHEL. These boards find their way into a lot of different products which just need to work, and industry partners usually replace some older versions of Raspberry Pis with these. And then for those who require much more power, we've seen a huge uptake in the ROG Pro 64 because that's a really well supported device at this point. But when it comes to modules, the Sopine has always been very popular, especially in the Asian market. So far, so much so that we were never able to really satisfy the demand, especially during pandemic and stuff. But now, based on the new single board computer, the Quartz 64, which is meant to be a direct competitor to the Raspberry Pi, we recently released the Soul Quartz, which is a Raspberry Pi compute module for sort of a form factor, which have seen a significant uptake in recent months.
So let's talk about that for a second on the Quartz 64. Does this module have the Wi-Fi built into it?
It does.
Okay. And so when people are doing projects, like whether they're doing something for STEM projects, for education, everything, and it requires a Raspberry Pi, how capable of switching in and out? Like the instructions, there's lots of guides and instructions because Raspberry Pi was so popular. How easy is it for me to take those same instructions and just do it on a Quartz 64 versus a Raspberry Pi? Is there going to be major differences or issues with hat modules or other things that I need to contend with? Or what's the differences there between them?
So with the Quartz 64, I'd say that it's probably not quite there yet when it comes to education. There's some boards which are, going back to those boards which have been on the market for maybe a year or two would be probably a safer bet, because those are really well supported and usually well supported by multiple distributions. Some people in the industry that are picking up a lot of these Quartz modules, but they usually have very large internal development teams that can make it do the things they need it to do now that there is a compute module 4 shortage. Yeah, we've recently seen support from major distributions for the RK3566, which is the basis for the Soul Quartz and the Quartz 64. And I think that for general enthusiasts and people who just want to toy with it, I think we're really, really, really close, but not quite there yet. Maybe literally, 3 or 4 months. And that single board computer is going to be fully fledged, for lack of a better word. I've seen a review or two on it, and I know some people say, oh, the desktop is slow. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, if you only fired it up in Wayland, it would be, everything will be fine. But it's these little things.
Yes.
Right. It's these little things that still need to be kind of polished up and finished, and distributions need to take a closer look at some of these things. And it will happen. It just needs another few months until that's there, right?
Yeah. So the Rock Pro 64, a little bit more expensive of a board, a lot more power in that board there. Also seems to have all the features that most of the Raspberry Pi projects for hobbyists would be looking for, more than most of the features, as additional features. The one thing it doesn't have, and I wanted to see if you guys are working on this, is the Wi-Fi chip built in. Is there a plan to have a Rock Pro 64B with a Wi-Fi module built on at some point? And if not, can you name it after me when you guys do drop it?
Well, so we offer a module for it, which just sits on top of the SDIO pins and kind of works natively with it. We have started including Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chips with all our newest single board computers. We do recognize that, especially in the hobby space, this is something that people really, really want. So if you look at, be it the Chord 64 or Star 64, has Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2 module on board. So we are quite aware of this. With respect to whether will there be revisions of the Rock Pro 64 at this point, I doubt it. It's quite it's its own thing and has been for 2 years now. I think going back and revising it at this point is probably it's probably not necessary. But it's interesting that you mentioned the Rock Pro 64. And when it comes to hobby grade stuff, so not industry stuff, but everything from game emulation to things which I don't understand about Bitcoin mining and stuff like that, right? Yeah. There has been a huge switch of people going from the Raspberry Pi 4 to the Rock Pro 64. So that has seen a massive uptake in the hobby space, a huge uptake. And there's a lot of projects which I can't pronounce and I don't even know what they do, that have published guides on how to have whatever it is that you want working, or what you had working on the Raspberry Pi, to now work on the Rock Pro 64. I was literally sent another link to it just maybe 20 minutes before we started the show.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful device. Has a lot of amazing features in there, including the 4K digital video out and stuff, so people can use this for all kinds. And you have the 40-pin GPIO in there that people can utilize, which is very popular add-in module for things Raspberry Pi and other. You've got expansion buses in there. You've got the ability to hook up cameras, pretty much everything there. So for hobbyists, I definitely recommend people go out and check out the Rock Pro 64. That Wi-Fi module on the boards, I think, is a good move for all of your future iterations, because I think it's one of those things where people want that all-in-one, and that's the really only difference Raspberry Pi has is in their chip, is that they have the Wi-Fi module kind of built in, but you can obviously add in the Wi-Fi module for the Rock Pro 64.
Yeah, I'll just mention that for a long time, the difference between Pine64 and Raspberry Pi and what they're doing is that for Raspberry Pi Foundation, the Raspberry Pi is their end product, and it's a phenomenal product at that, I must say, right? And I think most people would agree that what they do and their target audience, I mean, they do really, really well. But to us, single board computers are they're their own thing, but they're also usually a basis for us to create a device atop of it and use it as a development platform for a device further on in the future. So our mentality around single board computers has always been slightly different than some of the other manufacturers, right? So now that you see these new single board computers from Pine64, so that would be the Quartz Pro 64, the Quartz 64, the Star 64, and so forth and so on, each of them has a potential to later develop into the next, laptop or phone or whatever else, right?
Yeah, well, Cash, and that's what I was going to ask you was, what are the exciting things you guys are working on on at Pine64, such as maybe a RISC-V powered Pinebook Pro.
That's not a bad guess.
Yeah.
Nice, Jill.
It's not a bad guess at all. Yeah, I mean, it seems like a compelling device. I think.
Nice.
So, yeah.
That is a great way of answering that. Jill, you got him on the ropes. That was brilliant.
I did. I've been wanting a RISC-V powered laptop, and having it from Pine64 would just be the best.
Well, what's interesting is we're getting donations to us, thanking us for this interview, Lukasz, you being on here in our chat, because people are so excited about RISC-V content. And that's really interesting to me, that so many people are really wanting to get into this in a big way. And I believe Pine64 is the company that's going to make it happen, where we'll be able to get our hands on this. I mean, the $8 chip itself, like you said, this lowers the entire barrier for everyone to be able to get in there and start playing with this and getting their feet wet with it. And at $8, I mean, that's so affordable. It's insane. That's why I had to ask you twice. With everything going up in price, you sure it wasn't 80? It's 8. You sure it's $8? Yeah, that's awesome.
There's obviously a lot of potential both in RISC-V and in ARM. Just to be clear, just because we're kind of focusing on RISC-V this year doesn't mean that we're dropping the ARM architecture or anything like that. Just to be kind of clear that both can coexist happily. In parallel, in my opinion. I see, I see a lot of people being super excited about RISC-V. There's a lot of people who I know from the industry, really top-notch people doing incredible things. Many of them super excited about RISC-V, and then also highly aware that RISC-V has some way to go. Recently, I spoke to somebody who is a top authority on the subject of benchmarking, and this person benchmarked the Star 64, and the Star 64 in generic benchmarks tends to fall currently quite to look quite unfavorably compared to the Quartz 64, even though on paper they seem very, very similar. And I asked him why he thought that was the case. And he said, it's just a question of maturity of the platform. So RISC-V has, a good way to go before, especially in our little corner Linux of this space, that it becomes a properly fleshed out architecture.
Yeah. And, having an open RISC architecture has been a dream of mine. Since the 90s, I have a DEC Alpha, I have Sun Spark systems, and just having a new version of RISC that's open, available in our laptops and SoCs is just very exciting.
Yeah, it is.
One of the other things which we're sort of working on and will be introducing very soon are the Bluetooth earbuds, the Pine Buds.
Oh, nice.
And
I love it. Pine Buds, nice.
I'm excited for that.
What's so cool about them is that these are called earphones, and they are a relatively inexpensive brand of in-ear IEMs. And somebody from this community spent time to create a frequency analysis profile for your ears in particular. And then and effectively, to me, these sound better than very, very, very expensive brand name IEMs.
Wow.
Because they're quite specifically tuned to my hearing and my ear canal and stuff. And we made it so that it's going to be really easy to do the same with the Pine Buds. It's basically just a breakout via UART,
That's
via
awesome.
USB. So you'll be able to flash your own equalizer. The question is, I'll be straight up. I've talked to the person. He's quite well known within the audiophile kind of community. And I've spoken to him about it because he did an incredible job on these. Like, they're so good. The reason why I have them is because of him. It's like really thumpy.
The hack that makes it good. Yeah.
It's the hack that makes them good. So I spoke to him,
awesome.
and I really do hope that, he or somebody like him would be keen on picking up the Pine Buds and, tuning them and creating a tuning piece of software for individuals would be amazing.
Yeah,
Very
that
cool.
sounds fantastic. The fact that there's even someone who can do that is crazy, because I always looked at the hardware and those sorts of things as being the limiting factor. That's
With
fantastic.
the shape of everybody's ear canal being different and the sounds people can hear and ranges, being able to do those adjustments are very, very important. And you see a lot of companies are spending their time on that software side to get that right, not the hardware side. Because the hardware is limited by the size, honestly, that you're trying to, what you're trying to pack in there. It's not like your home speakers where you can just keep putting bigger magnets inside of it. I mean, you got these little tiny earbuds you're trying to stick in there. There's not much right now that you're going to be able to fix outside of the software side.
Very interesting prospect, and one of the reasons why we wanted to make the Pine Buds, because this is a hack. With Pine Buds, it's going to be just, as simple as plugging in and connecting it to your PC and getting the SDK, and then you can play with it. Or if you don't know how to do it, then hopefully there will be a community around these things. They will just make it very easy for end users to upload whatever equalizer and those frequency things are needed for you and your hearing in particular.
That would be amazing.
When are the Pine Buds coming?
Yeah, when can we put it in our cart?
They are close. They are very, very close. I don't know, but maybe next month, maybe December.
Well, we want to thank you and the entire Pine64 team. I mean, I know we're not supposed to be like fanboys and fangirls of guests that we have on, but I'm just straight up tell you I'm a fanboy of Pine64. Yeah. But thank you for bringing the innovations to the open source world that you guys are doing and making them so affordable for people. I think that's one of the big things that's amazing is when we talk to you, we're not telling people, hey, go get $1,200 and you may be able to play with this cool thing we're talking about. It's always very affordable. And additionally, I want to thank you for being a great member of the community. For those who don't know, Pine64, not only, of course, sending their boards to developers and things in the Linux world, but also sponsoring a lot of open source conferences and things recently, the KDE Academy, for instance, and just being a amazing member of the community. So thank you so much for all the work you do there in Pine64. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, love Pine64.
Thank you.
That should be a t-shirt. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Whether you pick up the Rock Pro 64 or the Quartz 64, one of the first things once you get your OS on it, you're going to do is install a password manager. And that password manager has got to be Bitwarden. This episode of Destination Linux is brought to you by Bitwarden, and you could get started right now with your free account at bitwarden.com/tux. That's /TUX. A password manager software allows you to have peace of mind knowing your online accounts are secure. Bitwarden provides you the tools to store all your passwords in a secured vault, auto-generate those passwords and your usernames as well, and automatically fill those in on forms. One of the best parts is you can have it across all your devices, whether on your web browser, mobile apps, desktop applications, even the command line, you can have Bitwarden in. Bitwarden seals and encrypts your private data, and this is the key part with end-to-end encryption before it ever leaves your device, so you know you're the only person with access to your data. Again, go to bitwarden.com/TUX to get started, but for $10 a year, you can get some premium features here, and you're going to want to support this amazing project. You get a gigabyte of encrypted file storage, 2-step login with YubiKey, U2F Duo, and that's my preferred way. I use YubiKey with everything there. Vault health reports, Bitwarden Authenticator, TOTP, priority customer support, and so much more, and that's less than $1 per month. Everything's going up in price. Bitwarden's price has stayed the same. Jump on it now before that could change. Bitwarden.com/TUX to get started. And thanks to Bitwarden for sponsoring this episode of Destination Linux.
Over the last couple of weeks, there has been a lot of buzz about a decision made in Fedora Linux. Fedora has decided to remove certain codecs from the default setup of this distro. This also prompted OpenSUSE to remove them as well. Now, these codecs we're talking about are the H264 and the H265, as well as the VC1 acceleration codecs. Now, the reason why this is being removed is for patent and legal reasons. Well, legal reasons because of patents. Now, this impacts the open source drivers, but it doesn't impact the closed drivers like the NVIDIA drivers because you have to install those manually anyway. So that's an additional step that you wouldn't be coming by default with those. Now, the AMD users and Intel users will have this kind of problem because they, by default, don't have to typically install drivers anymore. But in this case, they're going to go back to doing that. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of people have been talking about how this is a decision by Fedora, but it isn't really just Fedora's decision. It's more of the upstream Mesa drivers that made these changes, and Fedora adopted these changes. So a lot of people who are blaming Fedora for something that they didn't actually do. But another thing about this is the biggest issue is that a lot of people are saying that these patents aren't important, and well, they very much are. And because this could backfire in a big way if done improperly.
Well, let me talk about that for a second. So I've seen the same comments even on other podcasts and things talking about the fact that Red Hat should just include this and pay for it for users and be done, because Red Hat's a big, rich company, and why not provide it for free and license it out there? So I went to look to see how much this costs. I mean, we're talking like $10,000 here. Sure, let's do it, right, for the free operating system. And what I could find in some limited research here was some articles of between 2011 and 2015. Obviously, these rates have changed. And one of the things to key call out here is in the terms for these rates, it says we can change this basically at any time. So today it may be this price, but tomorrow they could come out and say, well, guess what? We want, $6 million more or whatever. And the company would have to adapt to that. And that's pretty hard to make a decision on in open source where we really don't know how many users we have at all. So how much do you actually pay them for this stuff? But under the terms in place for 2011 through 2015, the royalty rates are the same, regardless of whether a product is part of an OS or not. There's no royalty for the first 100,000 units of a licensed product. Sub-licenses pay 20 cents per unit up to 5 million and 10 cents per unit above 5 million. And that current agreement, which isn't current because it's 2011, 2015, included annual limits of 6.5 million per year, which I'm pretty sure Fedora would hit or very close to that $6.5 million cap there. So it kind of got me thinking when people were like, hey, just pay for it so that we don't have to deal with this. And again, this is more of a patent thing. I think people should really be mad at the US patent system, which is completely broken and a complete joke. That's where your anger really needs to be focused on. I think Red Hat protecting its products and protecting its business, they would be an idiot not to. Like, I would be mad at them if they did just allow this to go through and put the entire open source and Fedora at risk by not making this change. Do I like it? No, I do not like it at all. I do not like anything that makes it more of a barrier for new users to get in there and do the things they need to do. In fact, I hate it. But I hate the U.S. patent system for it. I don't hate Red Hat for it.
Exactly.
The question is, would people be willing to pay a few bucks, maybe $10, maybe $20 to download Fedora each time? Imagine if that was the result. I think people would be even more mad. How dare Fedora go out there and charge me for codecs that this other distro that may have less at risk, or somehow they feel like they're going to slide through that gray area where they're not going to get caught, is going to be free. I mean, I'm fine with that, by the way. If Fedora wanted to have a version that was $20 and included all the codecs and that, I don't think it's even feasible because, again, how do you know how many licenses you're going to buy and stuff? But let's say that was an option. I would be fine with it. But really, that's what we're asking for, because this is a very expensive thing, $6.5 million. I mean, yeah, sure, it's pocket change from Michael, but the rest of us,
I wish.
That's a lot of money.
I wish. But it's also important to point out that this 6.5 million relates to specifically just H264. But there's also H265 and VC1 that are also removed. Now, the thing that's the biggest hit here is the H265. And that's because the patent license says that if you wanted to do it, you have to pay a royalty, and this number is not capped. Like the H264 has a cap, but they can still change it based on whatever they say it's worth at this given point, or when they can still change it anytime they want to. But there is a cap. The H265, they can change it anytime they want to, and there's no cap. They can make it 50 million if they wanted to, just because. And once it's already been distributed, you can't really do anything about it. It's already there. They'd retroactively be on the hook for all this money. So once they realized that it was there, then they had to remove it because of the legal wording of how patents or software patents work. By the way, there's a website, I think it's insoftwarepatents.com or something like that is basically to show why software patents are horrible. And this is a very true statement. There has never been a time where software patents made sense. They're just in the way almost always. For example,
innovation. Yep.
Yeah, like this is nothing really new. Like we had for decades the same thing going on with the MP3 codecs, where we had to install the MP3 support because the patents got in the way. And that's just a thing we've been dealing with. And as soon as the MP3 was like, oh, okay, now we're fine now. But again, this comes about. So
I want to mention the other things I heard though too, Michael. I heard people saying like, well, the idea that this is even going to become an issue and that a patent troll could come sue them is, it barely ever happens. I never hear about it. And I'm like, what world are you all living in? Like we just had GNOME patent troll issue that hit that I remember us talking about and helping donate for that. I know RedHat has had several patent troll situations hit them very recently. This is not like some dream thing of, oh my God, it could happen. This stuff happens all the time. There are entire companies that's whole livelihood is made on buying patents, and they do nothing else. They didn't innovate the product. They didn't create the product. They don't enhance the product. They literally just buy patents to sue people. That's their whole business, is just suing people over patents.
Absolutely.
That's it. That's all they do. Yeah. Most worthless business in the world.
Yes.
But they exist somehow, and they sleep at night with their cash. They probably sleep on piles of
they
cash.
sleep on the cash, yeah. It's interesting because like you're talking about how like a lot of people are saying that this is not going, it hasn't been a big deal previously.
But it has been a big deal too.
Right.
Yes.
But again, it has been because of all these different patent trolls that come about for a variety of different projects. In fact, speaking of that, there's even a foundation of networking of people who are taking from different companies agreeing to share their patents to protect each other. It's called the Open Invention Network. So you join that network as a company, and then your patents go into this thing saying, okay, if you are a part of the network, you also get to use the patents that we have. And even giant companies like Google and Microsoft are part of this network to essentially protect themselves. And if they're needing to protect themselves, that's kind of the key of how big of a problem this is. So when people say it hasn't been an issue in the past, it hasn't been for this particular example, but it has been in general, like Ryan was saying. But the whole, the factor of this specific thing is that the biggest single word of the entire process of why they did this is the word willful. If they do willful infringement, then it means that they are basically going to lose the lawsuit instantly. If you can prove that someone willfully ignored the patents, then you're basically going to win. And the fact that they didn't know and they made the change as soon as they knew means they're not going to be sued for what happened previously. But if they were to keep it, not like likely. People are suggesting, well, they wouldn't likely lose even if they were sued, because they'd have to prove willful, and they've already proven here.
Destination Linux does not provide legal advice, and we were just giving our opinions and thoughts.
Allegedly, my opinion, etc., etc.
Yes.
I'm just some guy on the internet. I'm not a lawyer.
Well, you remember back in the day, we couldn't play our DVDs and video CDs and super video CDs with MPlayer and Cine and the other players that were around.
Until we installed these special
yes, that was because of the MPEG-2 licenses. And I actually was a member of the motion picture expert group, creators of the MPEG codec, actually back in the mid-90s to early 2000s as an animation instructor. And I had to understand awesome. And I had to understand the costs per workstation for the licenses, because I had to pay for several workstations for my students so that we could do DVD authoring and MPEG-2 encoding and with capture cards. So, and that was an expensive thing. It cost several $1,000s per workstation to get those licenses.
Gosh.
Yeah.
That's insane. But you know what the solution is? I love, by the way, that Jill has that experience. Like we talk
awesome.
about these. It's always Jill has the experience. Like if we just talk about the Mars rover, Jill will be like, I was a part of and built that. That's what I love, Jill. But what I think is interesting is the solution here is open source, right? There's an open source codec out there. Woohoo. It's a very good open source codec out there. And we should be pushing companies to move to that open source codec, which is the AV1. And if we move there, then all of these problems kind of go away and we don't have to worry about them. And I really don't know how big of an issue this is going to be. What I do know is that I believe I saw an article saying it's already out there in RPM Fusion, where you can just, if you need those codecs, you can go install them through the third-party software store, RPM Fusion.
It's being made in that, yes. I don't think I'm not sure if it's officially available yet right now, as in you can go ahead and install it, but I know that they are working on it for sure.
And yes, it's an additional step, and new users coming into Fedora are not going to know it, or OpenSUSE for that matter, are not going to know it. And whether Canonical and Ubuntu follow suit, I don't know. Generally, you see Canonical and Ubuntu being a little more willing to ride that gray line with things, but it's very possible they may, seeing all of this, switch as well. It's an additional step. It stinks, but open source is the answer. Push things for AV1, push these platforms to have AV1, and then we don't have to worry about this nonsense at all. I think a lot of it's been blown out of proportion, and I think the anger, most importantly, is being put towards the wrong people here. This is not something where Fedora's like, we don't want to work on the codec anymore, and we kind of like, what do you want to do this weekend? Let's get rid of the codec. Cool. This is like a real legit thing that they had to contend with because of the crappy software patent system and because we have closed source codecs like this, and we already have solutions we should be moving towards for them. That's my opinion anyways. Mm-hmm.
I mean, absolutely. The fact that the Fedora is definitely not super happy about this decision. They're doing it because they don't really have a choice. And that also is true with the Mesa drivers upstream. They're not doing it because they're super happy to lose support for stuff. Like they just need to do this for the legal reasons. And it's super unfortunate that these even are a thing, but that's one of the motivations for the AV1 codec to even exist, is to avoid these ridiculous patent trolls. And the more and more AV1 is adopted, the more how more irrelevant the H264 codecs and H265 codecs become, which is one of the reasons why the H265 codec did not take off. Like you'll notice that people are still using H264. And the reason is because H265's patent became super greedy when they took away that cap. So it was even worse. So there were so many people or companies trying to avoid using it because it would be a nightmare to use it. So AV1 is a solution to all of this nonsense. And that's fantastic. And it's also worth pointing out that a lot of things already have support, so it's not really that big of an issue, right?
Yeah.
So Ryan said he doesn't know, but so I did some research, and I hear some information. Netflix already has support for AV1.
Nice.
YouTube doesn't have support for AV1, but it does have support for VP8 and VP9, and it does those by default. So you'll notice that a lot of people tell you to upload H264 to YouTube, and YouTube will automatically convert that to VP8 or VP9, so they don't have to deal with that codec stuff. So, and also Twitch is working on moving to AV1, and there's also other things that they're working on. Yes, even Hulu and Peacock have talked about possibly moving, and there's even many more. So ultimately, it's annoying, but it's not like a catastrophic issue that people are making it out to be. It's not. I saw one comment or one article saying that Fedora has ruined their Linux desktop, and it's not that big of an issue. It is annoying for sure, but it's not like you can't get access to it. And I want to bring up one more thing. You mentioned Ubuntu and Canonical. There is a thing they do in their installer that a lot of people don't really think about anymore, but there's that checkbox that says, do you want to install these extra things, proprietary things or whatever? That checkbox means that they're technically not distributing the codecs or any of that stuff because you chose to click that box. And it's basically a gray area sort of thing. Whether that's good or not, I don't know. But it allowed, Linux Mint for a long time was known as the distro that came with codecs because they were, in theory, not big enough to sue because it wouldn't be worth it or whatever. And then all of a sudden, when Canonical provided that checkbox, Linux Mint now just provides that checkbox because they don't have to do the extra process of risking that stuff too. I think it'd be kind of cool if the other distros considered that. But the biggest factor we're talking about here as far as the patents go is that who is distributing the thing is the most important thing. The last person, like the last mile, or I saw a great analogy was saying, think of it as a puzzle, like the very last puzzle piece that is put in, that's who finished the puzzle. And whoever finishes the puzzle has to pay the license fee.
Yeah.
And if Red Hat or Fedora or whatever, or SUSE with OpenSUSE are the ones to do it, then they're the ones who are going to get the target. Whereas if you have a distribution that is a very small distribution not made by a company, they're less likely to be a target. Of course, not a lawyer, so I don't know exactly there.
Could be. You
still could be. Still could be.
AV1 is the answer at the end of the day.
Yeah.
AV1 and YouTube is doing some changes to test AV1 and putting those
Right.
Which is
implementations in, even for streaming. So
Yeah.
as proponents of the open source community, what we should be doing is writing the platforms and telling them we want AV1 implementations of these streaming services and of these video codecs. And we had last week, I think it was, encoders that you can use for different codecs of AV1 and things. So check this stuff out. Research AV1. It really is the answer and what we should be pushing to. And our anger needs to be at the patent system and not at Fedora Red Hat.
And not to mention that we have the latest release of the Intel Arc GPUs, which support AV1 encoding and decoding.
Yeah.
And the latest NVIDIA GPUs and AMD to come soon. And really, once the hardware manufacturers are all in on this, then it's just going to be easy to have that AV1 everywhere.
Chant with me. Down with H264 H265. In Ryan's opinion. Down with okay.
Down with them in general because of the patent system, but more likely down with the patent system for software. Like, I get the patents in a general sense, but software patents, no. The fact that there is a patent for how you open your phone from left to right with your thumb is only allowed for one company to do is so stupid.
Genius, Michael. It's genius. From a complete corruption and holding the world back standpoint, it's genius.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's good for the company to make money, but it's terrible for just reality, I guess.
Nico Jet says, what do we want? AV1. When do we want it? Now. Yes, there you go.
Perfect.
Yes,
I love it.
Perfect. So if you're depressed about the codecs and whether they're open or closed, you can just go play a really fun game.
Forget all about it.
Forget all about it. So today's game pick is Mythic. This is an interesting pixel art, massively multiplayer online role-playing game. And it was created by two best friends who took their favorite elements of massively multiplayer online role-playing games and roguelike genres and combined them together.
Nice.
So Mythic is an online dungeon crawler inspired by Realm of the Mad God and the classic Zelda games that we all love, where you explore an infinite procedurally generated labyrinth.
So Jill, I watched the developers playing this game. Like I love MMORPGs. They're really my first true love in the gaming realm on computers. You know, of course there was Doom and Wolfenstein and all of that stuff, but I mean, the game that I became obsessed with was like with Ultima Online when that came out. And of course, EverQuest, which was immensely addicting in these things. Now I'm an adult and I have no time to play these games, but I always think back on the nostalgia of being just addicted to a game like that again and having fun. And what I like about this is it's really geared towards that single player element. But you can run into people and party up with them as well to complete some of these MMO like elements. So that's what brings people together. So if you have a big boss and things. And the other thing I'll say is the developers themselves were playing against some of these bosses and dying like back to back to back. Because these bosses,
they're hard.
Current MMOs do this thing where bosses have these attack phases that get very complicated, certain patterns of attacks and spells that they attack with. And this is actually in a pixel game taking that same element of bosses with these different attack phases and implementing them with these randomly procedurally generated worlds and things, creating some really unique elements. Now, I do want to mention, though, there's a lot of negativity. So these are kind of mixed reviews right now on this game. I think there's some more work for them to do. I just think the foundation of this game is very cool. Like, I love the idea of it.
Yeah, and I really like the fact that it, is also an adventure game for the individual. You got puzzles, you've got enemies, you've got bosses and treasure to hunt for. But yeah, it has a nice co-op element to it as well, and I was impressed by that. And the fact that there are no pay-to-win microtransactions in Mythic. And the developer said there never will be. So if you want to play something truly, it's not going to ding you and ask you for money. While you're playing,
what's interesting? Game. We're talking about codecs earlier, and that there's these alternatives that are open source and things. When you look at gaming, and people are so upset over microtransactions, Overwatch 2 is a perfect example of a game that basically has been ruined by microtransactions and trying to copy the Fortnite model very poorly. I might add into their model as somebody who plays Overwatch a lot. It's been a very upsetting, annoying ride to watch them do that. But we keep supporting these games that do it. Like we keep buying into them. And so we need to support the games out there. Like we need to support the codecs that are open source that don't do these microtransactions and give them money and stop giving money to these big AAA companies that are doing this microtransaction nonsense if you want it to go away. Because you know why they keep doing it? Because it freaking works. People are paying for this nonsense. But I like these developers' commitment to not having microtransactions. And the game only costs $14. So
yeah, it's only $14.99 on Steam.
I also want to point out that it's interesting that they are doing the $14.99 because a lot of people would say like, oh, this is an indie game that's a little bit too high. And I would just like to say the fact that they're not doing the microtransactions is very important because you need to consider how much you would have spent if you got a game that was only $2 by default and then had like $25, $50 in microtransactions. Right?
Plus, there's a server cost. If they're combining everybody together, there's a central server they're supporting.
Yeah.
So, you're going to have to get some money somehow in there. I hope they do add DLC in itself is not a bad thing. Adding additional content and expansion packs and charging, that never bothered me. It's this microtransaction to death to do anything. Like in Overwatch scenario, you could play all these characters and you've been playing all these characters for years, then you move over to Overwatch 2, and now all of a sudden they're locked behind a paywall that is just infinitely stupid.
Oh, wow.
So the same characters you were playing, you no longer can, and it's not even a real Overwatch 2. There's nothing new about this game, really. The little refresh graphics, a lot of the maps are the same. It's really one of the worst implementations I've seen of it, honestly.
We need to be fair to them and find out, like, okay, maybe they're not doing much, okay, but did they add emote dancing? And if that's the case, then it's completely fine.
Fair point, yes. That dancing is really, really important aspect.
Yeah.
Very important for gaming.
It is.
When I look at microtransactions, it makes me want to go get Myuzi. It makes me so mad. And that's our software spotlight is Myuzi. Myuzi. M-Y-U-Z-I. I love music.
It makes me want to get my Uzi.
I love writing code, and I love relaxing to music after a long day. That's why our software pick, Myuzi, will help you get joy in all of that. I don't know about you all, but when I find a song I really like and I want to share it with friends, I go to YouTube because I just, any of these streaming services, I don't know if they have the same streaming service as me or not and all that. And it's kind of like our MTV now because you get the video too a lot of times with the music, which is nice. So I like to get my music a lot of times from YouTube. And Myuzi is a free and open source Linux app for streaming music from YouTube. It has no ads and does not require an account. So if you're one of those people like, hey, I'm de-Googlifying my life, I don't want YouTube anything. You don't have to have an account. You can just put the artist in and it's going to go find it and play it without all the ads and other things. It has a built-in search function to find your favorite artists. It allows you to create playlists inside of it. Myuzi is awesome and powerful. That's such a great sentence. I never thought I would say on Destination Linux. The first artist I added, I just want to mention, is Tupac. I was in a Tupac mood this week. I was a little frustrated, work and everything. I was like, Tupac. I need some Tupac. So
I ain't mad at you.
Some banging tunes.
I ain't mad. Man, Michael, well done. Well played.
So Myuzi actually uses YouTube DL and GStreamer for YouTube interaction on the back end. So that's why you don't have to sign into your YouTube account. Isn't
So
that nice?
awesome. I love it. This is a
Very
really
cool.
clever app, and you can get it as a flat pack.
Our tip of the week this week is RHEL, actually. And you might be thinking, we've heard of RHEL before. Like, well, there is a thing that RHEL is doing that is available as a developer edition that you may not be aware of. So I've seen a lot of people talk about, what should I use if I want to get into the enterprise? And then a lot of times on like Reddit and forum threads or something, they'll mention different options, like, for example, CentOS Stream or Alma Linux or other options, but they typically forget to mention RHEL specifically. And you might be thinking, well, the reason is because it costs so much. Well, it doesn't, actually, because the developer edition of RHEL, you can get it for no cost, completely free, up to 16 systems. That's right, 16 systems. It also means you get updates and all that stuff, so you get to use the full real RHEL to do whatever you want as long as you're using the developer edition, which is fantastic. And a lot of people are not aware of this because they announced this change during the CentOS saga, so it was kind of buried by that. So I think that's why a lot of people weren't aware of it, but that's why we wanted to put it for the tip of the week this week.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I first want to mention RHEL means Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And I want to mention that specifically because when I came into Linux, I remember listening to other podcasts that would say RHEL, and I had no idea what they were talking about. So if you're one of our new users, it's Red Hat Enterprise Linux out there. And you get up to 16 systems on there. I actually run RHEL, and it runs my Pi-hole, my FTP, my Nextcloud instances. Everything at home runs on RHEL on the UM700 that I have that was given to us thanks to the Manjaro team and stuff. And it runs fantastically on there. It's very easy to sign up for a license for this and get that enabled. And of course, it runs as you would expect Red Hat to do. So definitely, if this is an industry thing for you, you're wanting to learn more, you're wanting to get into server administration, those type of things, use RHEL direct. You don't have to use one of these other ones. You can use those. Those are all good options, but just know that you have 16 systems you can use in the developer edition for free.
I use RHEL as well because of this same reason. When like the whole idea of CentOS back in the day was we wanted to use RHEL, but we couldn't have access to it. Now you can. So there you go. Just use RHEL. And sorry, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. You're welcome, Ryan.
There you go.
I said it that time.
Good job. Well, we mentioned earlier during the segment with WooCache and Pine64, thanking some people for some super chats, because we do this live every Sunday at 1 p.m. I just want to mention one of the items we talked about is that if you troll Michael with a super chat, we will include it in the show. So, Lael, I want to include your super chat you just gave now, which states, everyone, this is not a super chat, it's a troll. Michael is awesome.
Oh,
wait, what?
Ah, fantastic troll. Well done, Lael.
Read that. I didn't read after the comma, and it got me. They got
Well
me.
done, Lael.
Well played.
Fantastic troll. You trolled Ryan by making him think you trolled me. Love it.
Yeah.
I saw the troll and I
Awesome.
stopped and I got to read it. It just didn't keep reading. Well, a big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. However you do it, we love your faces. And I mean that. Over 190 countries in chat today, all of these different countries from around the world shouting out, which I just love seeing. So many people supporting this podcast. We love you for that. We're here every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern live at tuxdigital.com/live. And the best part is everyone is invited to watch the recording of Destination Linux each and every week. We can't wait to see you in the chat.
Also, if you want to join us after the show and outside of the chat, you can join us in a patron-only post show where you can hang out and talk with us after the show every week. And you get this by becoming a patron by going to tuxdigital.com/contribute. And you also can get unedited versions of the show if you do miss the live chat or the live stream, because we provide those to our patron as well as many, many more things. So go to tuxdigital.com/contribute to find out all the great stuff you can get by becoming a patron. Also, if you'd like to support the show, you can do so at the TuxDigital Store. You can go to tuxdigital.com/store and you can get hats like Ryan is pointing to, which is the first time in a long time he's actually shown something that he really is in the store. Also, you can get the mug that Jill has or the shirt Jill has with a 33% more Jill and so much more great stuff like t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, stickers. You can get the cool stuff we have for the Sinister Wendy collection. There's just such amazing stuff at tuxdigital.com/store. And by the way, I'm not saying it's amazing because I did most of the artwork. That's just a happenstance that is true.
I was your muse, okay? So let me tell you how the artwork works, people. I draw something the equivalent of a 3-year-old with a crayon. Then I hand it to Michael, and he turns it into art. But that crayon portion
very accurate.
is very important.
It was. He conveyed the message he wanted, and I was like, that's a cool idea that I will not use this in any way. Let's make it from scratch.
That's not true. You used some of my crayon drawings.
I used it as a reference to then make from scratch.
Yes. Okay, good. Glad we saw
So it was there. It was used a little
very
bit.
talented with my crayons.
And make sure to check out our incredible shows here on Tux Digital. We have the Sudo Show, This Week in Linux, the DOS Geek Channel, Linux Out Loud, Hardware Addicts, Game Sphere, and Linux Saloon. And everyone head to tuxdigital.com and subscribe to all these awesome shows. And don't forget to leave a rating on your favorite app. Put a thumbs up.
And Jill, that was too nice. Do a thumbs up or else.
Yes, or we command you to do a thumbs up. 5 stars out of 5. Sudo command, exactly.
Yes. Keep those penguins marching.
In the full Monty of Linux and open source, awesome stuff.
I wrote that for Ryan.
Yes.
Perfect.
Everybody have a great week, and remember, the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye. Love you all.
Most of you.